Okay, so we are back after a break that was far too long. I'm very excited to be here tonight. We are joined by a new face. Another familiar face will be joining us here soon as Chris Griffin of the Horns Down podcast is going to be making his way in. But we're joined tonight by Jonathan Lewis. Jonathan, how are you this evening?
Another day, bro. Another hot day in San Antonio. That's it.
Can't imagine. Texas weather is the worst.
I'm over it already, bro.
Summer just began. Jance with us as always. Jance, how are you this afternoon?
Man, listen, I'm cool. I'm listening. I got to deal with the heat, man. I'm dealing with at least 82 degrees, which I thought was hot over here, but apparently I'm cool. I got the AC in the back. We're cooling.
Man, but speaking of hot and heating up, goodness gracious, recruiting right now. I mean, what a fun time to be a college football recruiting fan. Where do we begin, guys? Because we are coming off of a weekend full of hot visits. We have Oklahoma Sooner fans in here. Y'all had a huge day on the trail. Congratulations to y'all. But I think if we're going to start recruiting, we have two Bama fans in here as we're waiting for Chris Griffin to join in. We have to start with the visit that occurred at Alabama this weekend because Alabama played host to a smorgasbord of talent. Jonathan, I want to hear from Jance, you first, then Jonathan. What was your thoughts on the talent this weekend? What was your thoughts going forward? And what are you thinking for Alabama recruiting thus far?
Well, I mean, this is always the time of the year where this is where Bama starts to really pick up the heat. It's always the summertime. Normally, from February, March, all the way on until at least we get to this point, you get a lot of fans saying, oh, Alabama's kind of fall off. They can't recruit anymore. They're down in the 30s, 40s. I remember when Alabama was 57th at one point, and everyone kept saying, oh, they're finished. And then all of a sudden June and July comes, and then that's when Bama really starts to pick it up. And it's based off of these type of official visits. Of course, we had Arch Manning, we had Richard Young. We had so many other talents. We had the number one inside linebacker, the number one athlete. We had a lot of other great positional players come to visit the University of Alabama. And it's huge, especially getting a guy like Arch Manning, a guy that's been recruited so highly, by the University of Alabama, even though we have Eli Holston on our roster or on our recruiting trail, who also took, his a visit not that long ago. It's great to see because who knows? I mean, you never want to stop recruiting those type of positions like the quarterback position. I know a lot of Bama fans are like, why do we keep recruiting Arch? You never want to stop recruiting that position because who knows? I mean, Eli may decommit. We get these all the time. He may decommit, possibly last second. And then, because Nick Saban in Alabama was always involved in the fold, Arch Manning flips to Bama. And now we're going to be like, oh, well, that's the reason why we continue to try to recruit these positions, even though we're assumed we're set and ready to go. So it was just a great overall time. The players, for the most part, loved it. I know Arch Manning has, he's talked highly about Alabama, and for the most part, it's just I'm ready to go, man. I mean, we got July. This is the time of the year, every single year, where Alabama picks up these 5-star recruits. It's only going to be a matter of time before they start getting them. So I'm overall excited.
Jonathan, what's your thought?
Yeah, it's a lot to take away from the weekend, in my opinion. You talk about Arch Manning. You never want to stop, like you said, recruiting somebody like that for a multitude of reasons. Me and Ty actually had a conversation about this. Just having Arch on the campus alone is already an entry. He's going to bring that extra interest. I feel like Richard Young, to me, is a must-get. So him having his official visit. And then I feel like the underrated thing about these official visits is the hard commits that are visiting along with it. The Eli Holstein to come in, and I get it, he's already a hard commit, but getting him to talk to the other players that aren't committed, right? So to kind of get them to lean, the interaction, to get them familiar with each other, because we know, the best thing in my opinion, for recruiting is familiarity, right? But not just the coaches, but the other players. That's why they bring in Bryce Young. They bring in these guys. And then, you could talk about Anthony Hill, the number one linebacker. And there's just so many guys named down the list here, including the 2024 members that came through on unofficial visits, by the way, the 4 and 5 stars. Along with these guys is a whole separate topic on its own. But I feel like, like Jant said, you allude back to, everybody freaking out about Alabama last March, 57th in recruiting. And then all of a sudden it was just like the floodgates opened up, and it's kind of like a domino effect. I feel like it's going to be a matter of one or two players. I feel like Richard Young is going to be that domino, and then everything else will follow. But I'm really interested in following Cedric Baxter. What is he going to do now since he opened up his recruitment back into Alabama? I know he wasn't on an official visit, but all this stuff, man, just ties in together with these visits because there's a lot more to go from here. right? So these unofficials leading up to the end of the year, especially near November, December timeframe. So yeah.
Yeah, and
exciting.
you and I had talked about the viability of Alabama picking up both Richard Young and Baxter.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
On that,
That'd be a crazy one.
Right. I mean, how many times before have we seen Alabama take 2 top 10 running backs in the same class? I mean, Alabama does this. Anthony Hill is interesting. Anthony Hill is going to be tough to take away from Texas A&M. And then Oklahoma has done a great job with Anthony Hill. Brent Venables is there. Of course, always tough to say no if you're a linebacker to Brent Venables. He has a laundry list of prospects, the defenses, the linebackers. We know what he does. All due respect to Venables there. So, but it is Alabama, right? If anybody can come in here and disrupt a previously great relationship, which the staff at Texas A&M right now is great at establishing these. The staff at Oklahoma right now, great at establishing these relationships. If anybody can disrupt that, we do know it's Alabama and Nick Saban. So it's always one where you have to sit at the edge of your seat. We have people in the chat talking about Hill to A&M, Richard Young and his pursuit, and DeMarco Murray pursuing Richard Young, and Travis is out here. Travis, one thing I've said I love before, I love DeMarco Murray to Oklahoma. It's Jonathan makes this point, and I kind of want to use it, Jonathan. You talk about familiarity, but then there's also familiarity with the understanding of what it takes to succeed. And whenever you have a guy like DeMarco Murray in the room, he can genuinely look at you in your face and say, I know what it takes to succeed at the college level and the next level because I did it. That's a tough pitch to say no to, and it explains why Oklahoma always finds themselves in the running for these running backs. Now, the big question I have for both of you, do you believe that Alabama is going to be in a good position for these offensive tackles that visited this weekend? We had Caden Proctor, and then we had the big 5-star out of IMG in Francis Muagawa. So what are y'all's thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Jance.
Oh, absolutely. I think Alabama is always in prime position to get these type of players, especially from the IMG connection. Alabama has kind of started their pipeline of getting IMG players. I mean, you look at Evan Neal, and then you look at guys like Tyler Booker. You look at J.C. Latham, who was on the Alabama roster last year, and all of those guys were tackles. And so you bring in a young kid like Francis, even though he's not really that, all that too familiar. Maybe, with Tyler Booker, because he played with Tyler Booker last year. But, as far as Latham and Evan Neal, of course, he did not play with those type of players because IMG normally, they normally get their players when they're like around, juniors, seniors, somewhere around that pipeline there. So, but they do have an established pipeline at IMG Academy. They have a great relationship with their coaching staff, with the, with their athletic administration. So I think for the most part, it's a great chance of getting a guy like Francis. And I just think for the most part, just the attraction of Alabama, of just our coaching staff, especially with our history of producing offensive tackles this is a crazy stat, guys. I mean, we've had at least around, I think, 4 or 5 straight offensive tackles selected in the, more than that, but we've had around, 4 to 5 straight guys, just thinking out the back of my head, selected in the first rounds in the I would say from the first pick all the way for the 20th overall pick. I mean, that's just an impressive stat of his own. So Nick Saban and that coaching staff, they know how to get guys at the highest level from those tackles. And I think for the most part, guys, you can't ignore the University of Alabama. Alabama will get one of these guys. I'm more so of a Francis fan, very similar to when Evan Neal, when he transferred to IMG Academy, and you kind of saw what he did in the 707 regionals and what he was able to do in Atlanta. I said Alabama's going to do everything in their power to get that player, even though he was around 380 pounds at that time. They ended up getting him, and he ended up becoming exactly what I thought he would be, which was an All-American tackle. So for the most part, I'm confident that Alabama is going to be getting at least one of those 2 guys. More so, I'm more on the Francis bandwagon. But for the most part, Alabama's in great contention. They're for sure.
Yeah, Jonathan, your thoughts?
Man, look, I'm not going to allude too much on what he said because he pretty much covered everything here. Francis, I feel the same way. I feel like the IMG connection, Alabama is always that back door when it comes down to it. I feel like he's going to be the priority. But, how far are we going to go into the depth of the recruiting here? Because this is like 3 recruiting classes in a row where we're trying to pick up 4 offensive tackles. So at what point do we start thinking about, bringing in the Brockmeyer twins, and everybody else? And then eventually, when do we back off of this? Because Alabama is – sorry, my son's here. when do we back off a little bit? Because Alabama has this trend of going 2 to 3 classes in a row and then going light on a class in that position. So I feel like this could be that year, in all honesty, to where, the expectations are not going to be through the roof to get all of these guys. I feel like Francis, like you said, is probably, and I can't say the guy's last name, is the priority. We get him and we're good. So that's all I got to say. You covered it, Jance, perfectly, man.
Yep, and with that, what a perfect time for an introduction. Chris Griffin of the Horns Down podcast. Us very happy to see you again, my man. It's been way too long, but we're talking some Alabama recruiting. We're about to jump into some Oklahoma recruiting, but before we do that, I do want to get the outside opinion. Bama's had a ton of great visitors, man, coming off of a weekend featuring 2 5-star offensive tackles. Anthony Hill was in attendance. Richard Young was in attendance, as well as Arch Manning. So what's your thoughts about that?
I was headed to the gym earlier this morning, and I was looking at some 24/7 stuff, and I saw somebody said it's like made a comment, Arch is building his class or whatever. I saw him in the Bama track suits with lined up with everybody, and I was like, I mean, it wouldn't be a bad spot. It's going to be a competition spot for him, It's going to be the same thing that he's going to have to face at Alabama. Maybe not Texas. I don't know. We'll have to see, how great is Mullet Boy, Quinn Ewers. And, is Hudson Card going to be the answer? Who's the answer in Texas? That's the question you got to answer this year. And he has all the time in the world to make a decision. I know you guys just took another quarterback. And the reason why I'm basing everything off of Arch is because I think that's a key for him. Does he really want to compete? Because it looks like the 3 places that he would most likely go, whether it be Bama, Georgia, or Texas, he's got to look at that because 2 out of 3 is going to be a lot of competition there. Because a lot of people, obviously Stetson Bennett is there at Georgia, but you're looking at Brock Vandergriff. He's still there. He was a 5-star, right? So you're still looking at a lot of competition for him. But I mean, just from the outside looking in, it's Bama. You look at the 2023 top recruiting rankings right now, and you laugh. Texas Tech is there. Louisville is up there, and you're just looking and you're laughing, and you're just like, yeah, but that's not going to last that long because we know the Ohio States, the OUs, the Georgias, all those teams are about to come, especially with the recruiting prowesses that all these teams have. Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, they're going to go and grab their guys. It's going to be a heavy battle. Now, I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that the Ennis kid out of Broward County is just going to go to USC and follow Lincoln where he's going. Because I think you guys have a great shot because it looked like he was really, really impressed with everything. I mean, and the fact of the matter is that you guys have a tie that I don't think a lot of those other people do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mari Cooper's from Florida, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's another Florida kid that'll come in and just talk to him right then and there. So I mean, you guys have that advantage there, and so I think that you guys are building something. That 23 class could be special, especially with the kids, because it seems like obviously I feel like a lot of kids are coming to us and they are enamored with us, but it looks like Bama is here to stay with the recruiting, as contrary to everybody's belief with the whole NIL talk and all the rest of that stuff. I talked to my uncle this weekend about the Hill kid out of Denton Ryan. And I said, to be honest with you, man, honestly, Unc, I haven't really kept up with the kid. I thought it was going to be out of OU and Bama. But, he's sold on it. He's big on recruiting. He's sold on the fact that he thinks that kid is going to A&M. And I was like, I don't know. But I was like, I don't know if he necessarily is taking this process that serious, since he did take a visit out there to USC. But, I digress. But basically, yeah, I thought that was going to come down to OU and Bama. I thought he had really good connections, and it looked like he had a really positive relationship with the OU staff at OU, but also it seemed like, Bama was going after that kid pretty hard as well. But like I said, from the outside looking in, I mean, it's Bama, right? So like I said, you laugh at the rankings right now because you know that by the end of 2023 or by the end of this year, you already know that early signing period, Alabama's gonna be a heavy hitter in that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, I think the interesting thing here is something that Jonathan talked about, we alluded to earlier, is with Arch, even getting him in for a visit, that notoriety that comes with Arch, like the media storm that comes with Arch Manning, is inevitably a good thing, right? The fact that he came, he enjoyed his time is a good thing for Bama. But Bama's not the only team in the nation right now doing good things recruiting. There's a lot of teams we can talk about, but we'd be remiss if Oklahoma Sooners. Chris, y'all had a big day today. I'd like you to walk us through the past few weeks because the Champ U barbecue was not long ago. We have to talk about that. Walk us through the recency of Oklahoma recruiting, if you would.
I mean, obviously, we can go back to the kid who decommitted and went to Oregon. I don't necessarily know if that was a kind of just a bright patch on us, like, oh God, we lost that kid, it's the end of the world. I don't necessarily know that because, from what I'm told, the kid that we just picked up arguably is the best wide receiver in Florida right now. That's just, that's up for debate. I mean, Ennis and, some of the other kids, but a lot of people say he may be the best wide receiver in the state. But I would say it's been quiet. It's been a little bit quieter than what I thought. But at the end of the day, it's a new staff. Even though they're great, they're great recruiters. It's a new staff. It's going to be a little bit quiet until people see the product on the field. So it's not necessarily a wait and see approach or a boom or bust approach. You know what you were getting when you had Lincoln and staff here. You were going to have a lot of highly touted recruits in and out. But it's a different process now. And so, we talk about this in the DMs and we talk about this all the time. But with BV, you already know it's a different approach to it. It's as he liked to give that whole metaphor as far as it's a dating approach. Like, if you're going to commit, then just know what comes in with that commitment. But go out, do whatever you want to do. But I'm definitely looking to see a big splash, especially on the defensive side of the ball, man. I'm just ready to see a lot of, edge rushers and guys like that go ahead and start committing and everything. Defensive side is where I put the emphasis on. But it's interesting to see. I know in the comments, I just saw a lot of people talking about how the approach is different this year, or with this new offensive regime. We're going to be taking a quarterback probably every year, every cycle, which is going to be different because now we're just not, okay, we got Caleb Williams. Now we're going to get Malachi Nelson in 2 years. And then after that, we're going to go on to the, whoever's next after that, right? So it's different and its approach is different. The style of wide receiver that you're seeing us getting out is a lot different as well. And it's just really interesting to see how this recruiting staff, this staff is going about recruiting, but I definitely like it and I think it's positive.
Yeah, before I pass this off to Jonathan and Jance to get y'all's opinion, I do want to update Bryson Sanders, who Oklahoma was in the running for, has just recently committed to Ole Miss. Great win for Lane Kiffin. But for Oklahoma fans, on earlier today on 24/7 Sports, a crystal ball was inserted for Caden Green. Not like y'all are in a bad position. Yeah. Peyton Kirkland is another one to keep an eye out on if you're an Oklahoma fan. But real good win for Ole Miss. Jonathan, I want to hear from you about Oklahoma recruiting right now. What are you feeling?
I've been doing Oklahoma recruiting videos, it seems like for 3.5 to 4 weeks now. One of my first ones was Caden Green, actually. I said I thought he was an Oklahoma get. I'm glad that he's crystal ball there now. It makes me feel a little bit better on that pick. But when I look at it, man, not just the recruiting, but the pickup of LV Bunkley Shelton from Arizona State, I thought was a huge get for Jeff Lebby because that vert and shoot system, man, like you need that 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" receiver that can go up, be a red zone threat inside that 50-yard line. I thought that was amazing. Another one, Caleb Spencer, I believe his name is safety. I thought that was a steal essentially for him because Brent Venables, I'm sure he's going to implement that cheetah position, just like they do the star position at Alabama. And this kid literally is like identical for what you would want in this. He reminds me a lot, and I'm not going to say he's going to be this guy, but you go back and look at the early Minka Fitzpatrick days when he fit in because he played that star position so well and he can move around, come off the edge, whatever he needed to do. Reminded me a lot of him, in all honesty. I'm not going to say he's going to be that style or that elite of a player, But when I go through the class here, another guy I talked about was obviously Keon Brown, another big receiver. And I feel like in time, Oklahoma will shore up the defense, obviously, but I don't think it's going to be as fast as everybody thinks it's going to be either. It's the same thing with USC. Everybody wants to hype up USC. You know, they're going to win the Pac-12, go to the playoffs. We already had this conversation, Ty. But you still have to gel these guys together. This is a whole new system put in place. But when I look at it, too, through the rest of this class, let me bring it up real quick. They got McIntyre today, correct?
Yes.
Cade McIntyre came in today. And obviously Jackson Arnold, I did a video on him as well earlier, probably about 3 weeks ago. I thought he was like this staple of the class. Like, this is the guy you need to hold on to. He was a 4-star at the time. Now I believe he got upgraded to a 5-star.
Yeah.
And and then you also look at what's the 2024 QB? What's his name? DJ. Oh my gosh, he's slipping my mind. He's also on to Oklahoma. He's crystal ball to Oklahoma now. He's
the kid from Cali?
Yeah, 5-star quarterback. And the one thing that sticks in my mind every time I do a recruiting video for Oklahoma and then picking up these guys or crystal ball there is Colin Cowherd going on national television talking about how, Brent Venables can't recruit Texas now, can't recruit California because that's where Lincoln Riley goes. And I'm seeing BV put in work, but, I can sit here and talk about how I like Jay Valai, how he's actually impressing me now recruiting for Oklahoma versus Alabama. Ty, that's a whole different topic on its own, right? And then Jeff Lebby, and obviously the defense coordinator there, placeholder in my position, or my opinion. Obviously, we know BV's going to sign off on the defense. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just enamored. I'm impressed with what Brent Venables has done as a first-year head coach on the recruiting trail already. Hands down.
But to be, man. I mean, Brent Venables has done a good job, and the staff is really doing great work. I never understood the Cowherd take about Oklahoma not being able to recruit Texas. Like, that's mandatory.
Yeah.
He said that Lincoln's Inn was in Texas, and I'm like, no, it wasn't. Lincoln's Inn it's in Florida, but not. It doesn't make sense to be in Texas for him. He doesn't have a pipeline there, or you know what I mean, the connection.
Yeah.
You're going to recruit your rival state, no matter what. You're going to establish a pipeline there. That made absolutely no sense. I mean, absolutely no sense. Jance, I want to pass this off to you now. I want to hear your thoughts on Oklahoma's recruiting, where they're going, what you're seeing, what your kind of expectations are.
Well, I think for Oklahoma, I think they're very similar to us, like Alabama. They're all, it's a little bit of a slow start, but again, once we get into that July, that late summer, that July, that fall period, that's where you're really going to start seeing this coaching staff really start to put it together. Because again, Jay Valai, of course, didn't really do the best for us at Alabama, but obviously he's doing a great job at Oklahoma. Todd Bates, it's only going to be a matter of time before Todd Bates really starts to put in his work. Just as an incredible recruiter and a great defense and a great coach that he is, especially with the defensive line position. So it is only going to be a matter of time before he starts to really pop off. But that coaching staff that Brent Venables takes, it's going to take of course it's going to be off to a little bit of a slow start. This is a new established coaching staff that, again, Lincoln Riley shot Oklahoma right in the back. They didn't even see it coming. So you got to try to put these pieces off together. And if Brent Venables is not really off to that much of a great start of recruiting the state of Texas, that's just not because he doesn't know how to recruit that area. It's because he's trying to really familiarize that area. He's trying to really get to know that area, really get to know the prospects before he can actually start to go in and try to strike it there. I mean, again, he just has not had that much time yet. So I think that for the most part, it's only going to be a matter of time before you really start to see these recruits really start to get going. I know there's some kids that have been crystal ball for Oklahoma for a while. I know Hicks. I think his name is McIntyre. Some other kids that are crystal ball. They got, again, the Darnold kid quarterback there who just got to that 5-star status is there as well, which, again, I agree Oklahoma is going to continue to recruit that position at a very, very high level. But there's no question about it, guys. I mean, by the time we get to the fall season or maybe late summer, I think you're very similar to Bama. You're really going to start to see the results really start to come into play. You're really going to start to see guys like Todd Bates and a lot of these Levy, a lot of these guys that are known for being really good recruiters to really start to work their magic. So I mean, if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I wouldn't be all that worried about it for the most part. We all know Oklahoma, the brand that they are. They're going to continue to get recruits, especially from the pipeline, like especially in Texas. You're right next to Texas. I mean, that is your rival, and you got too many schools in that conference. Too much talent to not get in there and get at least some of the best players from the state of Texas. So they'll go ahead, they'll do that, they'll do their own thing, establish their pipeline. I'm just excited about some of the other areas, especially the DMV area, which Brent Venables is he's been accustomed to for almost a decade. I'm more, curious to see what he does with that area in the future compared to what he does with the South. I know he'll be fine in Texas. I'm very interested to see what he'll do in the DC, the Maryland, that Maryland, Virginia area, since he's already had an established, he's already known for having an established pipeline over there when it comes to recruiting.
So one thing I would say is an obvious fact that we already know, we just point out about with the staff and everything. So a lot of these kids, they know Clemson football, but they know Clemson championship football. It's not them turning on TV and watching Clemson play Boston College or play Louisville or even play Florida State, even when it's a primetime game. Who are they watching? They're watching the Texas. They're watching OU, they're watching, all the guys that are local or the big, all those games like that, the CBS game, 2:30 game CBS, they're watching big noon kickoff, stuff like that. They're watching Bama and they're watching teams like that. They're not obviously they're not watching Clemson that closely, right? Because some of them may not like Big Ten football or even ACC football, right? So a lot of them, it's not like a lot of these kids have a huge, sample of like what's actually going on with that. They're going to have to see the product and see how do they really fit into this system. Of course, they come there and they get their family atmosphere, but they just got to see the product just at least one more time and a little bit closely just to get there. But I can tell you this right here, with the whole recruiting approach, that's a part of it as well. But you didn't put yourself behind the 8 ball with having 70,000+ fans show up to the spring game. So I mean, you built that atmosphere and you made an impression on a lot of recruits, and a lot of recruits want to be part of that. They just need to see that sample size, Then another thing that we've talked about as well, and let's just go ahead and talk about NIL. I believe that I'm not even going to call them blue bloods, but I'm just going to say the teams that have mostly been in the college football playoffs year in and year out, their collectives, now they're having these collectives and now they're having these NIL initiatives that are basically putting them on level ground with Texas A&M and all in schools like that who are USCs who are just trying to shell out money, right? So I think it's a good point to make that this is especially like Bama, OU, whereas you have all the facilities, you have, good money, but you may not have the Texas and Texas A&M type money, right, to shell out. But at the end of the day, if you could get it to a point where it seems like it's neutral ground, then maybe recruits will start paying attention to what's most important, which is not only do I want to shine, but I also want to win. Because if I'm winning, then that means I'm shining. You know what I'm saying? It's all synonymous. So I think that's something that's important as well, because you need, you want these recruits to pay attention to that, because at the end of the day, yes, you could come and make $2 or $3 million, which is still life-changing money to the normal person. But at the end of the day, you can say, hey, yeah, you can make that $2 to $3 million in college, and that's all that you have, or we can actually develop you to actually go and play and have a 10, 12, 15-year career in the NFL, if that's possible, if you stay healthy and set your family up for lifetime success instead of just pretty much this short term in college. So I think that's something important to look at as well.
Well, one thing that I think is really interesting, as important as this class is for Brent Venables and the Oklahoma Sooners, and it is indeed important.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm going to make a principled argument, that next year's class is going to be a much clearer indication. And here's the big reason. Forget results on field. I think we all understand that. I think the results on the field can speak for themselves, right? You do good, you're more likely to recruit well. The reason is because what the rule Brent Venables has in place about he wants you to be sure when you commit, right? If you commit to Oklahoma, you shut down your visits, and that's the way he wants to do it. Take your visits first, get your idea of where you want to go. Because of that, most of your 5 stars and stuff, we know that a lot of the 5 stars like to take their time during the process. They're going to go and sign later. Oklahoma's in a situation where they're now trying to build relationships with kids based on this year alone for the class of 2023. Right? Brent Venables had relationships with these kids while he was at Clemson. It's a different situation now. Next year, you're going to be talking about a class that Venables and company will have built relationships with for a full year. Yeah. So that rule of you need to be sure that we're where you want to go when you commit isn't going to be as almost as hard to get around as it is right now, because there's so much extra work and time put into those relationships. This year is going to just be interesting to see how OU is able to navigate and set up these pipelines and establish these relationships. One thing we talked about, guys, that I wanted to hit on tonight, whenever we look around college football, there's no shortage of topics, right? There's a lot of moving parts in the SEC. We've talked about how there may not have been a better year for everything to happen to Oklahoma than this year because of all the moving pieces in the Big 12, and now there's a whole lot of new in the Pac-12. So one thing we wanted to talk about this evening is who the biggest threat is to Oklahoma, to Alabama, and to USC. I guess we'll start with USC since that's kind of the neutral ground here between Alabama and OU fans. So USC and the Pac-12. Jonathan, I'll start with you. Then I want to hear from Chris and Jant. Who's the biggest threat to USC within the Pac-12?
Right now, it's hands down Utah with Kyle Whittingham, and to me, that's not even close. The fact that he's established and built Utah where it's at already, they won the Pac-12 last year. Utah did win it last year, I believe. And now they're coming back this year, and they have a chance to establish themselves with a win over Florida at the Swamp. And I feel like if Utah gets that win, that's going to set the tone for them the entire season. So I think that can't be overlooked. I don't know what to expect out of Dan Lanning. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anybody really does. Him as a first-time head coach as well. But when I look at it as a whole, I'm just going to have to say Utah is going to be easily the biggest threat to them. Because I don't see Arizona State beating them again. I believe UCLA will be a threat. I don't see them putting 30 up on them again like they did last year, or beating them by 30, put up 62 points, I believe. So, I'll have to say Utah this year for USC.
Interesting. Chris, what are you thinking?
1 second. I'm trying to look up Oregon's schedule.
They don't play USC this year.
Yeah, they don't play USC this year. Mm-mm. They have Utah at home. Man, I'm gonna go out on a limb and Ty, I think you'll understand where I'm going with this. I've said it plenty of times to you. Okay. It's not necessarily the Oregons or the Utahs that I'm worried about with Lincoln. It's the Cals, the Stanfords, you get where I'm going with this? The Arizona States, teams like that you're like, oh, yeah, Lincoln's going to walk in there and beat them by 20, 30. And it turns into, think about it. Those are the equivalent of Iowa States, K-States, right? It's games like those that scare me for USC. So I say not necessarily a USC game because Riley will have his team up for games like that, but and Oregon, especially with them talking all this noise that they've been talking, which they've been gunning for his head. They haven't taken shots at him. They've taken head shots at him. They've came after him and called people out. Well, he had a guy named Kyler Murray. You saw what we did. All the rest. You get what I'm saying? Or he had Baker Mayfield and all the rest of that. So basically what I'm saying is this right here. I don't necessarily think it's the games that we all are just pointing out like a Utah per se. I think it's the games where you're like, oh, they should win that game by 30 or so. Because let's put it like this. They played Notre Dame this year, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
And you can say the same thing for Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman looked like a genius in that bowl game against OSU in the first half.
Yeah.
Second half, I was like, what the hell is going on? Why are we rushing? You have slow linebackers. Why are you rushing? You've been rushing the entire time. But that's neither here nor there. But basically what I'm saying is that a team like like Notre Dame could go 7-5 next year, and Lincoln could be 10-2, right? Or excuse me, like 10-1, right? And it'd be the difference of going 10-2 or 11-1. And I promise you, a game like that where they're probably favored to win by 2 touchdowns, they will probably end up either losing by a touchdown or only winning by 3 points. You get what I'm saying? It's just what he does. And I mean, look, I love OU. And for the 6-7 years that Lincoln was here, I loved it. I was riding for him. The brisket, the defense, all the problems that we had with OU, I was there for it all. I was denying everything. But last year, we just had some problems. And it seemed like on the surface, everything was just exploding and right in front of us, right? But like I said, just to go ahead, and I'll let Jess have it now, but like I said, I can't necessarily say a USC, not USC or a Utah, some team like that. I think they'll be ready to play teams like that. Because at the end of the day, he's not going to have that much talent in the trenches where it's going to matter. And Utah is going to be a physical team like a K-State, teams like that who feel like, hey, we're just going to, we're just going to knuckle up and go toe to toe with you. But like I said, it's the Cals, the Stanfords, the Arizona States. It's going to be teams like that you're just like, man, they have no business staying with you, but for some odd reason they are.
Jans, who's the biggest threat to USC?
Oh my goodness gracious! It's definitely a little bit of a hard question because I don't think there's an established team like in Alabama, like a Georgia. I don't think there's just not one of those. Even a Baylor, Oklahoma State. It's really between two schools for me at this point. It's Utah and Oregon. I want to say Oregon so badly because even though yes, you got a lot of players from them leave the transfer portal, the talent that they still have, from those early Mario Cristobal classes are still there. Justin Flo has showed so many flashes of being a premier linebacker, but he just can't stay healthy. And then when you pair him up with Noah Sewell, I mean that's one of the most dangerous linebacking duos in the country. But again, the problem is that Justin can't stay healthy. Byron Caldwell is, I like him for over there. I have questions about the quarterback position. The trenches from the offensive line kind of wore down for them last year, midway point through the season. I think their secondary is a little bit more of a question mark. I still feel like they haven't recovered from that 2019 year where they had, I think, around a couple All-American players. They had 4 all Pac-12 players. So I feel like they just haven't really recovered from that. Again, Dan Lanning, I mean, we'll see what he does. We'll see what he does with his first year there as an established defensive coordinator, very similar to Brent Venables, how he can, I guess we can say, quote unquote, how can he establish SEC physical football over there? But, I don't know. I might have to just go with Utah because I like them. I think, Cam Rising, I think, is one of the best quarterbacks there, especially as a leader of the team. Clark Phillips, I think, is a first-round pick. And they just have, again, I think the combination of veteran leadership, their coach with Kyle there, and really just an established coaching staff. I feel like they just have all the pieces there. USC is going to be the fan favorite because they have probably the most talent as far as transfers to come in with Jordan Addison. You picked up Shane Lee from Alabama. You picked up, Mario Williams from Oklahoma, Caleb Williams from Oklahoma. If Lincoln Riley had the option, he can choose the whole damn team from Oklahoma. But for the most part, I think the biggest problem with USC is the fact that all those players have to gel together. And even though, I love the transfer portal, it's fun to watch, it's fun to keep up with. At the end of the day, when the season starts, I mean, no matter how many times you practice with those guys, I mean, you really need game experience to really see, what are the holes, what are some of the things that you need to work on, what are the strengths. So I feel like the combination of all those things together, I look at Miami, where Miami took advantage of transfers where they had a whole bunch of talent, but it took them a while for them to kind of get it going. And even when they had to get it going, they didn't really focus that much on the recruiting aspects, or they didn't focus as much on the recruiting aspects. So, I do have some questions with Lincoln Riley and USC, right? How well will these transfers really play together? And, again, I mean, Chris just said it, he does have a time to struggle with mediocre competition. It's just been a part of Oklahoma where it's just always that game or two where they just always tend to struggle with. And the Pac-12 is a conference very similar to the Big 12 where, even though we look at the Pac-12 and say, well, that competition is weak, for some reason in conference play, you really start to see upsets like Arizona State to Oregon, which happened a couple years ago, which blew their chances for the playoffs. You really start to see, where Utah had an opportunity to go to the Pac-12 and they blew it against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. You start to see those. And I just don't know if, and Lincoln Riley, with his history of that, with all the players coming in, I think offensively they'll be good, but I don't know how well they'll be defensively. And I think I look at Utah, and I like their combination of offense. I think their defense is solid. I don't think it's great, but I think it's solid enough for them to propel and get them a Pac-12 championship. But, I got Utah with, I got them winning around 11 games. I got them 11-2, winning the Pac-12 championship. USC, I think they'll do great. I think they'll win around, 9 or 10 games this year. I think Oregon will be in a very similar ballpark. But I'm not in this camp to sit up here and say, just because USC had all these transfers that automatically Lincoln Riley is just going to automatically change the program and they're going to just become a premier contender, not just for the Pac-12, but just in college football. I think, we're going to have to see more recruiting classes. We're going to have to see some gameplay, some experience to see how well he can do there. But I think they'll do fine. I think, he'll do great his first year. I just don't think they're going to win the Pac-12 with Lincoln Riley's first year.
Let me jump in real quick. I got a point to make, okay? I think probably, honestly, I'll tell you who's the biggest threat to USC, okay? It may be Lincoln Riley himself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tape out there on that GT pool count or whatever you want to call it, okay? It's a lot of tape out there on that. So is your run game going to evolve or are you going to stay committed to running that GT pool, right? Also, on first down, are you big enough? Are you strong enough to run the ball not on first down, but on 3rd down and 1, 3rd down and 2, or 4th down, as we all know, Lincoln will go for it, right? Are you going to have an H-back versatile enough like a Jeremiah Hall, a Mikey Henderson, a Braden Willis, Austin Stogner was back there. But, you go back to the H-backs that he's had in the past. Even using Mark Andrews, guys like that, Trey Fox. He's had so many of those guys, right? So does he have a H-back who can actually run that position like he wants to, right? Because that's a big part of his offense. Then also on the 4th down and short yardage, the 3rd down and short yardage plays, are you big enough in the trenches to actually run the ball, or are you going to be doing triple reverses and jet sweeps like you're known to do when you like to pull that rabbit out of the hat, and every OU fan is like, what the hell are we doing, right? So the biggest threat may be Lincoln Riley, because we all know that Lincoln Riley is one of the, if not the top offensive mind in all of college football. However, last year was definitely questionable. And it wasn't until Caleb came in there that it made you feel like, okay, now it looks like an OU offense, right? But there's a lot of tape out there on this offense, and especially with the run game. So I think that this is a really good year for Lincoln to reestablish himself as the top offensive mind in the nation and make everybody forget about last year and just say, okay, yeah, that's Lincoln right there. You get what I'm saying? Because he's going to have the talent, I believe, on the perimeter. Watching their spring game, I think he's going to have the talent on the perimeter, right? So obviously getting Addison, Mario's going to be big. Caleb's going to be able to make those throws. And even if Caleb got hurt, the backup for them, I think Miller Ross, nice. He's nice.
Yeah,
he's nice.
Very good.
I'll be honest with you. A lot of people will come knocking for him, especially if he doesn't even, a lot of people will knock on his door. That kid's nice. He can make all the same throws that Caleb can make, but we all know Caleb's special. But I think they'll have it. Travis Dye. I think they'll have a good running game. They'll have a speed running game. But at the end of the day, Lincoln's going to have to reestablish himself as one of the top play callers in the nation next year.
Well, the interesting thing about this, Jonathan and I had a conversation. USC might be the most intriguing team in the nation in 2022 to me because of the vast range of possibilities at their doorstep. A college football playoff berth, though surprising, I don't think is out the realm of possibility because the pack isn't all that strong. There is a chance they could make it through the pack. However, the question Jonathan and I asked, just because you make it to the playoffs, does that make you a playoff caliber team? The answer we ultimately arrived at was no, it does not. And so that wouldn't be an indication that USC was playoff ready. Now, I do think the future is bright. The other possibility is that they could drop a few games. And to answer my own question, who's the biggest threat to USC in the Pac-12? Here's how I look at it. Jonathan, I completely agree with you. Right now, the answer has to be Utah because they are ready now. Whittingham has been there. It's not a first-year thing. It's just ready to go right now. However, I do wonder about what Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks are going to be able to build. Remember, if there's a brand in the Pac-12 that can compete with USC or attempt to compete with USC, it's Oregon and the Nike brand. So they have an inherent advantage that a lot of other institutions in the Pac-12 just don't have. Plus, Dan Lanning wanting to bring that SEC-style defense, if they can do it, will be intriguing. My question is, for USC, what's the defense going to be? My question for Oregon is, what's the offense going to be? Because even under Mario Cristobal, it was never where I thought it ultimately should be. There was almost something that felt missing. But completely agree. Right now, Utah is the answer. I'm just very interested in Oregon. The one thing now we need to move forward to is the Big 12 and Oklahoma. Chris, I want to start with you on this one, being the Oklahoma fan. Who's the biggest threat to Oklahoma in the Big 12?
Man, I'll be honest with you. I think the biggest threat right now I think it's Baylor. I think Baylor because even though you everybody may have their is it Shapen? I think that's the back. They're starting quarterback now, right? I think people are going to have some question marks about him because he can sling the ball around. There's no doubt about that. But is he going to be more of a game manager or is he going to actually be able to let it rip? I think in the offense, I think the scheme. I think that the offensive coordinator will open it up for him a little bit more than what he did for Bohannon. But one thing that I'll say, yeah, it's definitely them. It's definitely simply because we get Baylor at home this year. We get O State at home this year. Baylor's going to be something that no other team in the league is going to be, whether they're good or they're bad this year. They're going to be consistent. They're that team right there that where you could be the most talented team on the field, but they're going to try to outwork you every snap, and they're going to hit you. So you got to be ready. They're going to hit you. They're going to be fundamental, and they're going to be sound all over. And so to beat them, you have to play a complete game. And so we get that game at home, and I know I've said it. Baylor has to go to Austin, and they have to go to Norman this year, which is going to play. It's going to play into our hands because the thing for Baylor, great, you won a Big 12 championship and all the rest of that. But it's different whenever you're coming, off a loss to a team that you should have, dominated in TCU, and you're coming back home in front of your fans and you're jacked because OU, Texas is coming home, right? It's coming to play you at home. But it's going to be different this year if they drop a game before those games and they come to Norman or Austin, right? So you're looking at it and you're just like, well, I feel like OU is going to be in a better position because the same style of ball that they want to play, which is physical, punishing, all that, relentless and everything. It's the same style of ball that OU wants to play this year on the defensive side of the ball. Granted, it's a brand new scheme. Players are going to have to really get a feel, but that game is so late in the season that by that time, you should have basically circled the wagon and have your guys that are going to go out there and give max effort. They should be ready for that, for a game like that. And especially with that play style, it's going to be a lot of hard hitting. It's going to be going. And, they're going to try to take care of the football as much as they can because time of possession and just, frankly, possession of the ball is going to be big. But I look at the O State and I say, hey, I like what you guys went out there and did, getting that DC. That's great. But that's a new defense. And you guys, he's used to having some guys. Granted, he did coach at Vandy, right? But I'm not saying OSU doesn't have talent on defense, but at the end of the day, we got to see what that's going to be like. And then secondly, I don't care if he was all first team Big 12. Spencer Sanders has not evolved. He's been the same quarterback each year. And people have to realize they cannot come out here next year and expect to run the ball 30 times a game with Jalen Warren. That's not going to go. I think this is a year for that the Big 12 is not wide open It's only between a few teams, but OSU was sneaky good last year, and I don't necessarily know if they're going to be able to sneak up on people like they did last year, right? And then with Texas, for as much crap as Texas fans give OU, it's funny because they have the same problems. They don't have a proven edge that, I talked to Karen today, and Karen's saying that the biggest problems they have is edge, corners, and O-line. And that's big. But now Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, Josh Nayor, they're supposed to score at least 30 points per game, 40 points per game now, and have his team rise. Jatavian Sanders is supposed to come from the dead, from the freshman cemetery, and now he's supposed to have a huge year this year. There's a lot of expectations that they're putting on a lot of freshman offensive linemen in the interior, exterior, interior. They want it all over. And you're sitting there saying, Bijan's amazing, but you get on every Twitter space and they're talking about Roshan Johnson, Keelan Robinson, who we saw nothing from last year until he got hurt. And then Mullet Boy, who's only had 2 snaps. I get it. And here's my spiel. We're going to have to talk about this maybe in the DMs. It finally makes sense to me now about Quinn Ewers, because who was Quinn Ewers for OU fans? Spencer Rattler. Jalen Hurts was the answer for that team simply because it wasn't that maybe Rattler wasn't necessarily ready, but Jalen Hurts fit better in what Lincoln was trying to do that year, at least early on in the first 7 games. And that's my gripe with Texas fans about Hudson Card. With that offensive line being as bad as it was last year and having the same guys still there, Hudson Card makes more sense. Second year in the system, he's going to be able. In my opinion, he's more mobile than Quinn Ewers, so he's going to be able to have a better pocket presence. You would hope. You would hope that he would evolve, right? But I think there's just too many question marks after Texas. There's a lot of question marks going down there because you look at a K-State and say K-State could be a threat to everybody, but how good is Adrian Martinez going to be, right? And not how good is he going to be, how consistent will he be? Because he's been really inconsistent and really sporadic. But I'll let you guys go. But, I would say Baylor and nobody else, to be honest with you.
Vance, before I pass this one off to you, I did want to say, Vincent, show, he says, Roll Tide. Vincent, very glad to have you. Very glad you found the show. As always, man, we love to do this. It's always a good time. So very excited to have you here. But, Jance, same question. Biggest threat to Oklahoma within the Big 12 this year is who?
Well, Chris and I go like my answer, but I'm gonna say Texas. And the reason why I'm gonna say Texas is because the reason why I'm gonna say Texas is because I'll say this. It's Baylor. Let's be honest. It's gonna be Baylor. But I'm gonna say Texas because they have no choice but to try to do that threat to Oklahoma. If Texas is not having a good year for 2022, there's going to be a lot. Let's be honest, Steve Sarkisian is going to be put in the hot seat because how many years now, how many coaches will it have to take for Texas? And, especially when Texas is about to make the move to the SEC going into 2020, going into maybe 2024, maybe, who knows, maybe 23, 24, somewhere around that line. But when Texas goes to the SEC, when Oklahoma goes to the SEC, it just seems like to me that Oklahoma is going to be way more prepared to go to the SEC than Texas will be. So they have no choice but to try to show off. Now they have skill position players. I think they're going to have one of the best skill position positions in the country. I like Bijan Robinson. I like Roshan Johnson there. Keelan Robinson is one of the best. I think he's one of. I just feel bad for him because again, anywhere else in the country he would be a starter for it. I know how dynamic and how huge of a threat he can be in both the running game and the receiving game. But as a 3-down, as that potential third string running back, he's going to play a big role for them. Of course, you look at Isaiah Neer, the transfer from Wyoming. I think he's going to be a big player for them outside. Xavier Worthy, I think if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. Jatavian Sanders and Jaleel Billingsley, for the most part, it seems like Jatavian Sanders has that tight end number 1 position in control. But we all know the talent that if he gets his head right, Jaleel Billingsley, the talent that he has, there's no question that he can make plays. The only question marks I really have for them is the offensive line and their defense. That's really the only point. And I think that is where, it sucks that, Texas offensive line was really bad, not worse than Alabama's, but it was a pretty bad offensive line for them. And now you have to try to, you got to try to make things work again. And here's the thing I will say. It is the Big 12 conference. They're not really known for playing elite level defense. I think that, again, Oklahoma is going to have is going to have a more heavy emphasis on the defensive front, especially focusing on the trenches. I think Baylor, for the most part, I think they're going to be a force there, especially play like Siaki Ikea. Sorry if I butchered that name, but I think that's a player very similar to Vita Vea who could end up being a first round draft pick there, leading that defensive front. So for the most part, I just think for Texas, they have no choice. Because if you went around 7, maybe 6, 7, or maybe even 8 games, how will the Texas fans feel? How will the boosters feel? How will your athletic administration? How will they really truly feel? Especially because it is Texas, it's the brand that it is, and that's a program that should be competing for championships. And you bring in Steve Sarkisian from that Nick Saban pipeline, along with Jeff Banks, along with Kyle Flood, and then you also bring in Bo Davis, who's supposed to be this defensive line guru, who we all know he is. I mean, Bo Davis is an incredible defensive line coach. But if those coaches, if they can't get that situation right with the amount of talent that Texas has over there, then how do you expect the next coach to try to figure out? I mean, we've been through around like what, 4 to 5 coaches.
But James, you gotta remember, you've already seen this before. You already have a sample. Charlie Strong. Come on, man.
I know Charlie Strong's a good coach.
The only difference between Charlie Strong and Sark was that he actually beat OU.
Yeah.
Well,
they both lost to Kansas.
I'll tell you what I found funny, Jan, because you said that your big questions for Texas is the offensive line and defense, right? I mean, that's effectively 65-70% of the team. Yeah.
That's just it's sad, but I mean, man, I don't know, for some reason I love these skill position players that they do have, and I think if they can get the good thing is for Texas is that a lot of those guys are back, and there is continuity, there's chemistry that you can form with the offensive line, and like Chris said, if you again, whether if you put in Hudson Card, a guy that's already played under that system with those guys, or maybe you get a guy like Quinn Ewers, a guy that can maybe potentially build some experience, because we all know he has the talent to do it. He just doesn't really have the game experience, which is still crazy that he got millions of dollars for not even taking a snap. But still, Quinn Ewers is definitely a guy that if he can gain some more experience, especially playing with if you're throwing it to Isaiah Nair, Xavier Worthy, IG Hall, Jatavion Sanders, Jaleel Billingsley, you would take that all day, despite having not the best offensive line. You would take those weapons all day. With Bijan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, and Keelan Robinson for you to protect you and hand off from the backfield. For me, yes, they have players on the defensive front. You got Alfred Collins, you got Overshawn as your will outside linebacker. Luke Brockermeyer is there. Anthony Cook is going to be there as the safety. He's one of the better safeties in college. But they gotta take that next step. They gotta take that next step, especially because, again, all the hype that was surrounding Steve Sarkisian and that coaching staff that he formed, a lot of those guys from Bama, you better get it right. You have to get it right, because if you don't get it right for 2022, when are you going to get it right? When are you going to be that type of? When are you going to finally form and get it right there? Because right now we're watching Dave Aranda. We're watching him establish dominance around the Big 12, and he's only been there for around a couple years. He's now going into his 3rd season there, coming from LSU, and he's already established a presence, something that Steve Sarkisian and some of the other coaching staffs that have way more talented teams at the University of Texas than Baylor has. We've seen what Oklahoma State has been able to do for years. Maybe not take control of the Big 12, but they've been around as one of the top 3 teams, while Texas has been extremely inconsistent for over the last decade. So, in my opinion, the pressure is all on Texas. They have no choice but to be better, to be good. I don't think 7-8 wins is acceptable. I think if they can get around 9-10 wins, be competitive in the Big 12, I will take that. But they have no choice but to be good, because if they don't, then Steve Sarkisian is going to be on the hot seat going into 2023, in my opinion.
Well, here's what I'll say. Here's what I do agree with you on. As far as skill position goes, if they do figure out that offensive line, the offense they could field could be scary. Right? The pieces they have. But you're still talking about a defense that has got a lot of holes, and it is still a major if for them to get the offensive line figured out. Now, before we dive too deep into this, because I can see Chris's face right now, Jonathan, I want to pass it off to you because I'm scared Chris will go onto a rant we won't be able to get him back from. So, Jonathan, who's the biggest threat to Oklahoma in the Big 12?
Mine's going to be short and sweet. I'm going to give you two answers. The first one is because it's right now Baylor with Dave Aranda, in my opinion. Dave Aranda's only been in the Big 12 for 3 years. Like you said, he's starting to establish his name, the Baylor name in the Big 12. But he's definitely not going away anytime soon. I think that's the obvious answer. Blake Shapen, didn't he complete like 17 passes in a row in the last game last year? So clearly he's got something there. But I got a question for everybody out there. Not trying to revert from your question here, but how much difference does a West Virginia team look like with JT Daniels?
And that was something I was going to bring. How are we feeling about West Virginia? Because JT Daniels is interesting. They still have stuff to prove, but I would say I think West Virginia could be a sleeper team in the Big 12. Not necessarily to win the conference.
Exactly, yeah.
Nice people do some nice work, put together a nice season.
Yeah, and I feel like Nebraska was possibly also the best 3-9 team I've ever saw. I mean, it's not like people were beating them. You know what I mean? What they have 3 losses in a row with a combined of 8 points. And these were against top, right? Big 12 talent and all this other stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think Dave Aranda with Baylor is going to be the easy answer here. I won't dive too much into it. But, I mean, the real question is why are we assuming that they're a threat to OU when Baylor's clearly claimed the dominance here? They took the Big 12, so why isn't it reverted back to who's the threat to Baylor?
Very good question. Very good question.
Come on, man. It's Baylor, man. I mean, rightfully so. They won the Big 12. Let them have their parade. Let them have their time. Yeah. They're the Big 12 champs until somebody else says differently, right? Because we got to say that for 6 years in a row. Yeah. But I just say this right here. You don't get Texas and you don't get OU at home this year. And that's key. Yeah. That's big. Huge. Because as much as you want to say they were a good team, they won the Big 12 and stuff, they did not play well on the road all the time. No. Not by any means. Texas Tech, come on now. You want to talk about West Virginia? Texas Tech could be good this year too. They have a lot of buzz going around them. Oh my gosh, Texas fans, get excited because you might see Devontae Smith 2.0 with Joshua Moore. Baby, yeah, get the popcorn ready. But no, I mean it's Baylor, man. At the end of the day, is Shapen going to be the guy? We came into it. We talked about this a lot. Ty, Jance, we all talked about this. Could Bohannon get them to the next level, or is he going to just be the same quarterback? Because you got to have those big league aspirations, but you're just talking about winning Big 12 championship. That's boring now. OU's won a lot of them. We want to win something more, something a little bit more substantial. But hey, they won a championship, so let them be number one. They should be number one because, like I said, the reason why they're the biggest threat to OU is because they're going to be the most consistent team. You know what you're going to get day in and day out. Iowa State lost basically everybody and have a whole bunch of people coming back. That is a hard spot. Piggybacking to a point you made, Ty, about in the Pac-12, Utah is Iowa State. You talk about Oregon and the question marks around Oregon and USC, you got to think about that too. Utah has never been in this position where they got a monkey on their back, which is basically the hype train, right? So you got to think about that too. But going back to it, Iowa State is a question mark. K-State, K-State is going to be consistent. They're going to be a rough and rugged team. You already know that. The bottom tier of the Big 12 is still good enough to go out there and compete with Texas, OU, OSU, and Baylor, okay? So it's not like every game is going to be a cupcake this year, regardless of how people try to, talk about the Big 12. You could get tripped up if you don't pay attention.
Yeah, so things I think when I look at this, I'm going to agree with everybody. I think the answer is Baylor, right? I think that's the easy answer. The reason, Chris, I completely agree with what you're saying. When you look at Iowa State, they have to replace their entire offense, essentially. Yeah. You're talking about quarterback, running back. They lost some key pieces on defense. They kept some key pieces on defense. Mm-hmm. But they have to replace too much on offense for me to just feel real confident about what they have going forward. Oklahoma State lost a lot on defense and a defensive coordinator. It's not like I can give them the benefit of the doubt of saying, well, they have a guy that's been there for 5 years. He's coming back, so he's earned our trust. He's now at Ohio State, and he looks to turn that around. And my, oh my, if he's able to do that, it could be scary hours in the Big Ten. I think because of that, the answer is Baylor. But I do agree, Jonathan, completely that West Virginia is a team to watch. Maybe not to win the Big 12, but
not to win
somebody's day. I think they're good for it.
Yeah.
I love your point about the Big 12 as a whole this year is one to watch, right? Don't assume anything because some things could happen. We're going to end this out on Alabama, right? Who's the biggest threat to Alabama in the SEC? I'll kick this one off because I have a few answers that I think are going to surprise people, and I want to hear from y'all. First and foremost, I'm not claiming this is going to be the biggest threat to Alabama. I'm saying, please, for the love of everything holy, do not sleep on Arkansas. Arkansas has been a team that has been playing Alabama real close the past few years, and they did some real good work in the transfer portal. Now, what are their wide receivers going to look like? They have to do that. They have to figure out what that offense is going to look like, but the defense is very, very good. Texas A&M is a team that's going to be trying to prove a lot, but I just think in revenge games, Nick Saban is so good. LSU is intriguing, but I don't put them on the same level as Arkansas just yet because of the continuity of Sam Pittman and staff. And then there's Georgia, right? If you make it to the SEC championship, Georgia is the answer. If we're including the entirety of the SEC, Georgia is the answer. If we're saying Bama's division within the SEC, I think the answer could be Arkansas or Texas A&M. Jonathan, what are you thinking there?
There's so many ways you can go with this. To me, the obvious answer is Georgia. Everybody wants to assume they're losing their whole defense when that's not the case. I would say about half the starters this year played a lot of games last year because Jordan Davis wasn't on the field a lot last year. These guys weren't 3-down, guys staying on the field the entire time. They have a lot of very high-level talent coming back. Stetson Bennett's still there. As much hate as I give Stetson Bennett, he's done nothing but win. Plain and simple. The best tight end group in the country, probably in the history of college football. Ridiculous adding on, what's his name, Eric Gilbert. So from LSU, obviously, you still got Brock there. You still got Darnell Washington. It's ridiculous. And Georgia still has, now Will Muschamp there in an actual coaching role, not just an analyst role. So they are super, super deep in every position. I love the running backs. I think this is the first time since Kirby Smart's been there, there's not going to be a 5-star running back on the field, but I don't think we're going to really look into that too much. As far as the wide receiver position, that's probably going to be the biggest question mark for a lot of people. But I think that A&M is very intriguing because I think Max Johnson did a better job than what a lot of people give him credit for at LSU. And with him going over to A&M, I feel like that could be with that. Could be something there with Kane, I believe is his name, the running back. And A&M probably poses one of the biggest threats in the West. I want to say Arkansas, but losing Treylon Burks, that's a big ask to replace him. Losing Bumper Pool, losing Hazelwood, obviously. Losing Bumper Pool, the linebacker, obviously him getting, going to the NFL. Like they lost a lot of really good talent. And, I feel like Arkansas is not the team that's going to reload, right? They're going to take a year or two to come back to where they were. So I think it's kind of unfair to put Arkansas in that position. I'm not ready to say LSU is going to be that team because I don't know what Brian Kelly is going to look like with, to be honest with you, their quarterback position. I don't even know what to take from that. And Ole Miss.
But that's a question.
Yeah, it's a huge question. And Ole Miss, what is Jackson Dart going to look like with Ole Miss? Because Lane Kiffin's still there. They're still going to be able to score points. And they are finally recruiting defense. So
Bumble is still on Arkansas.
Oh, he's still there.
He's still there. He's still there.
I thought for some reason he declared. All right, so Bumper Pool's still there, but they lost a lot. And KJ, I think, is possibly the second best quarterback in the SEC behind Bryce Young. I think there's something there, yes, but I just don't see it, man, because once again, Alabama's revenge games. They played Alabama close, yes, but I feel like this year with Alabama's defense stepping on the field, really, with Bryce Young coming back in that squad, I don't see it, man.
Now, here's my question, Jonathan, before I pass it on. Does it matter that we have to go to Arkansas this year?
No, it's not, because Will Anderson, Dallas, do you want me to name off the defense? The defense alone, man.
Look,
you're asking a lot.
That was the same defense that got shelled out by a freshman offensive line for Texas A&M.
No, of course, but you're looking at a no longer true freshman Kool-Aid McKinstry. True. You know, Eli Ricks, Jordan Battle. You know what I mean? You still got Will Anderson, Dallas Turner. You know, Henry Ato'oto, second year in the system. Jalen Moody. Like, it just goes on and on and on at this point. And then the offense bringing back, you know, not bringing back, but bringing in Jamar Gibbs, obviously Tyler Harrell, the deep threat, Jermaine Burton coming over from Georgia. We've seen what we can do with transfer portal guys already. Right? True. Alabama develops the positions. That's exactly what they do. So, yeah.
Jans, what are you thinking?
Well, the obvious is going to be Georgia, but I'll probably just exclude them because we all know it's Alabama, Georgia, than everyone else. But if there's a team that can potentially ruin their day, maybe potentially pull off an A&M, I think it is LSU. And the reason why is not, again, you are perfect, right about, the quarterback position, who's going to play quarterback. There's also continuity between his coaching staff, his established coaching staff, bringing guys like, Mike Denbrook, Frank Wilson, Joe Sloan out and kind of rest those guys in there to try to work with these players. But I got to respect LSU's talent. And I got to respect the fact that besides Auburn, Georgia were the only two teams that really messed up Alabama's offensive line consistently for all 4 quarters. But there was one other team that you got to throw in there that did it as well, and that was LSU. For all 4 quarters, for the most part, Alabama's offensive line could not handle LSU's defensive line, and that was a very young, inexperienced defensive line. And you're bringing back all those guys back, and we all know, guys, Alabama's offensive line. That's the biggest question mark for me on this team. That's the biggest question mark is that offensive line, not the defense, not the skill position players. It's that offensive line. So you bring back Mason Smith, you bring back Jaquelin Roy, Ali Gay, B.J. Ojolari. You bring back 2 of the best edge rushers from the SEC coming back. Mason Smith really started to take off late in the season. Jaquelin Roy had an amazing year. Probably had one of the more underrated seasons. And then you bring in guys like Mekhi Wingo from Missouri. You bring in guys to ensure your secondary. You bring in guys like Brooks, those 2 Arkansas secondary players. You bring in Brooks, who's one of the better nickelback, cornerbacks in the nation. I just like LSU and I like their talent. I respect that much. Again, the offensive line needs to be better. You do bring back an experienced unit back from the offensive line, very similar to Texas, but they need to be better there. John Emery needs to take a step. Very similar to Texas, they got some incredible talent at the skill position players, especially. And we forget Keyshawn Butte was hurt. I mean, Keyshawn played around 4 games, had a season-ending injury, but before that, he was on pace to lead the SEC in receiving yards. You now have one of the best receivers and future first-round prospect over there, who had, again, great success against Alabama's secondary during his freshman season. So, for the most part, I respect LSU's talent enough to give them credit. Again, A&M, for the most part, we saw a person that barely completed 50% of his throws torch Alabama. They had a young offensive line, and we couldn't really do squat for the most part. LSU, again, I have to respect their talent. And I got to respect the fact that they did something that not a lot of teams did to Alabama, and that was dominate Alabama's offensive line consistently from the first quarter all the way to the 4th quarter. So I'm going to say them. Again, there's question marks about their coaching staff in certain other areas, but overall wise, we all know that there was one team that competed with Alabama toe to toe for the last 15 years. As far as again, we wanted to compare their talent, and that's been LSU. LSU's been the only other team that they don't need top 10, top 15 recruiting classes. There again, we all know they recruit the state of Louisiana, and that talent is just as equal to the talent that's there at the University of Alabama. And has been that way for the last 15 years. Even though the track record will say Bama's dominated the series, we all know LSU has been there. They've been close. And when they do ensure their offense, when they do have that coaching staff properly in place, we all know how dangerous that they can be. So I'm going to say LSU.
Love it. Chris, what about you?
Okay, I need my friend Jonathan to go ahead. Who was those guys that you named on defense again?
For us, Will Anderson, Dallas Turner. Come on, Alabama.
Alabama, yeah.
Quincy McKinstry, Kool-Aid, Eli Ricks, Jordan Battle. I mean, Malachi Moore's healthy now, right? Deion Branch, DJ Dell, Burrows,
Henry To'oTo'o.
Henry To'oTo'o, Jalen Moody.
Mm-hmm. Byron Young, Justin Abogbe.
Yeah. I mean,
I think what the name that you're forgetting is Pete Golding.
I mean,
I think he may be a big threat to Alabama as well, especially with these two guys. You know, the host of the show and then a guy named Jance. You know, I think they might have something to say about Pete Golding's his play calling, right?
No.
Because in those games where he's talking about they got dominated, it's because they said it. It's not that they got dominated; he just over schemed. Players he had to dumb it down pretty much for the players to get it because I don't know what was going on out there. But I digress. I just wanted to point that out. You guys ask me.
Wait, Chris, also throw in Bill O'Brien. Throw in Bill O'Brien's name.
I was going to say that actually, Bill O'Brien as well. But
throw in his name.
The problem in those games were what? We couldn't blitz, get to the quarterback. Well, a lot of people also, as much as I don't like him, who do we bring over from Florida that literally specializes in that? Grantham. He's an analyst.
That's his specialty, his bread and butter.
People are overlooking that.
Listen. This is all that I'm going to say, okay? Hopefully it doesn't piss some people off out there, all right?
No, I know.
Biggest threat, all right? I'm going to say this right here. War Eagle, fly down the field, ever to conquer, never to...
No.
All right, now that's out the way.
Fight on, you orange and blue. I got Auburn by 40 because they were killing y'all last year, and they went and got the Bama killer. They went and got David. All right, they went and got David to come out there with a slingshot again and slay Goliath. They went and got Zach Calzada, baby. What are y'all gonna do when the orange and blue come for you? Huh? What are you gonna do?
Oh man!
I got Auburn by 40. I've been saying it for the last 3 months. Auburn by 40. War Eagle, go War Eagle. Yeah.
Who's gonna be the head? Is Brian Harsin still gonna be the head coach?
Hell if I know.
Wait, hold on. Wait, Chris, are we playing on the road against Auburn?
No, this year's in Tuscaloosa. We played them at Auburn last year.
Oh, okay. Okay, then Alabama's gonna win by 50 points. That debate's over. If we're playing on the road, I'll give you that because for some reason, every time we play down there, all of a sudden just crap happens every single time.
Every time.
Jesus appears out of nowhere.
Forever. That stadium.
Do what?
Harvey Updike cursed the Crimson Tide in that stadium forever when he poisoned those trees.
Oh, Jesus.
God bless his soul. He's gone now.
Yeah.
All I gotta say is this right here. See me in the DMs and we'll talk about that. We'll make it interesting. All right. I'm
not gonna see you in the DMs because that's upsetting.
But what I would say, outside of Auburn, I would say honestly the biggest threat may be LSU. It may be LSU. LSU, Arkansas is a close second because Arkansas is kind of like Baylor. Either they're going to be consistently bad or they're going to be consistently good, and they can run the ball just as well as anybody else. So, and they had success in that game. They did not go away from it. But I think Auburn will be really good. I mean, not Auburn, but I think Arkansas has a chance to be really good this year. It all really depends on the development of KJ Jefferson. Is he going to be the guy this year, or is he going to be sporadic at times throwing the ball? And, I mentioned Hazelwood's name just like, play around. But the thing for Hazelwood to kind of reestablish himself as somebody a lot of people were excited about, he's got to be able to create separation. Yeah. That was something he struggled with at OU last year, was just struggling to create separation. Granted, coming off an ACL tear, so, hopefully he should be healed up. He's a year or so removed from that injury, so you're thinking that. But I look at that and I say the Daniels kid from Arizona State transferring in to LSU gives you a legit dual threat quarterback who can move, who can do some things. Brian
very high.
Yeah. Brian Kelly has never had a defense like this or had the talent that a defense like this could possibly have. If he would have had Marcus Freeman, I would have absolutely said they're at least top. They're top two. They're top three, and they're not three.
Yeah, if they had brought Marcus Freeman, I think we'd be having a different conversation. Yeah. Now, John, I do want to hear from you real quick. Who was your team in the division for Alabama that you thought was the biggest threat?
I would, in all honesty, I would say LSU typically, but I don't know what I'm going to expect out of Brian Kelly in this staff. So I'm going to go with A&M.
So we have 2 LSUs, an A&M, and an Arkansas. Right? I love that there's different answers, different way of viewing this. Now, Chris, I somewhat cut you off there, and I wanted to let you
good
right there. But you were talking about LSU and them not having Marcus Freeman, and if they would have had Marcus Freeman, I mean, you talk about a conversation that would need to be had. Goodness gracious. Go ahead and finish out what you were saying there.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, they're still, I mean, Jamar Cain is going to be probably their best recruiter anyways. But and I'll say this right here, with Jalen Daniels there's still questions on him, but I think that going into the season, he may be the best quarterback that Brian Kelly's ever had.
Ceiling wise, I could certainly make an argument for it.
I'm just saying that Brian Kelly because here's the thing. One of the reasons, and kind of piggybacking off what Jess was saying, is this right here. LSU is one of those few teams where you say they're one coach away from being elite, right? They're not players, they're coaches. LSU and Florida State are some of the only teams that you can say that about, where they need the structure. They need that. They need somebody to come in there, and Miami as well. They need structure. They need a coach who's going to come in there, who's going to get all the talent, but also put them in position to be successful. These programs haven't had that for a long time, right? You have Ed Orgeron, who, for better or for worse, he won a championship, but at the end of the day, it was because he had all these great assistant coaches around him. He built a staff up with pretty much head coaches and just amazing assistants who basically established that culture, at least for that year or 2 years leading up to the national championship. You get what I'm saying? But a team like LSU, that's what Brian Kelly's going to be able to come in there and do. And nobody's saying Brian Kelly is one of the top coaches in the nation. I'm not going to say he's a great coach, because, I mean, he's played for national championships. I don't necessarily think he's won one. But I think with him, it's just like, man, you really handed him the keys to a true Ferrari. Not to say he didn't have a Ferrari up there. We know what Notre Dame is, but Notre Dame fails in comparison to the athletes he has here, right, at LSU. And this may be the most talented team, and they haven't even had a real recruiting cycle yet. But this may be the most talented team that he's ever had, as far as just talent all over the field. So I think that it's for him to go there, add that structure, add those boundaries, add those parameters, or whatever you want to call it, that he wants to add in there, install his scheme, get everything going. And if Daniels can catch on, and then the defense can be nasty, or at least just have a better pulse and be consistent, which they weren't last year, man, that team could be scary. Because offensively, he's going to come out there and it's going to be either ball control, or he's going to let it rip just a tad bit to go ahead and do what he needs to do. But it's not like he was when he was at Notre Dame, where, offensively they couldn't really get a rhythm going, because defensively that's where the emphasis was placed, and they weren't good there. I mean, as much as we want to, say Marcus Freeman is a great defensive mind, let's be honest. That Notre Dame defense last year was still mediocre. Yep. I mean, outside of Kyle Hamilton and maybe I think one of the corners or so, I mean, that defense was mediocre. And linebacker too, it was mediocre. It was not good at all. They put up gaudy numbers, but I don't know. In my opinion, I think Brian Kelly, with that talent pool, I think they may have something to say. I'm not worried about Jimbo. Jimbo's notoriously an 8-5 coach. You look at what's going on with his quarterback situation, and you're like, I don't feel confident about that room. Got a 5-star freshman. Didn't look really hot during the spring game. I know it's just a spring game. You got the Johnson kid. I was big on the Johnson kid last year, but, I don't necessarily know, because in that system right there, there's a lot of working parts that have to work out for you to actually be successful in Jimbo's system, right? And then the Haynes King kid, he got injured last year. He was obviously the starter, but I don't necessarily know if he's even going to be able to, So
his spring game was rough.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's the problem. You're looking at an Evan Stewart, and you're like, man, you're kind of stuck on an island out there now. because you're by yourself. You're the best wide receiver on the team as a freshman, but who's going to throw you the ball? And if they do throw you the ball, it's most likely going to be 50-50 balls all over the field.
So I got a question for you guys. And do you think there's any pressure on Brian Kelly year one? Because it seems like a lot of LSU fans are putting it on themselves.
No.
So you don't think so from an outside perspective?
Yeah, I would say from an outside perspective, no. I mean, of course, LSU, they have huge expectations because not that long ago they just came off of a national championship. And with the talent that you have there, that's already established, because it's not like USC where you have a bunch of guys brought in from the transfer portal, even though, again, LSU brought some guys from the transfer portal. But you got a lot of that talent is there. They got a lot of returning players that are projected NFL draft picks. That entire defensive front I just named, all of those guys are, two of those guys are projected first round picks. The other two are guys that are projected to be around day 2, day 3 picks, and the Mekhi Wingo is projected to be a first round pick. So you got so many, and then your secondary. Jay Ward. Besides Eli Ricks and Derek Stingley, Jay Ward, who was a safety, but then they brought him down as a corner, I think could emerge as being one of the best cornerbacks in the country. You're bringing Greg Brooks. You're bringing I'm gonna butcher his last name, but Joe Fawachi. You have a lot of dudes there. Mike Jones Jr. from the transfer from Clemson last year was pretty solid for them. You got a lot of dudes already there. So in state-wise, the pressure is going to be on Brian Kelly, but from an outside perspective, no. For the most part, everyone's thinking of A&M, especially with the whole Nick Saban, Jimbo Fisher feel right now. Everyone's thinking about it. Everyone's buying tickets. But that's why I say LSU, because normally as Bama fans, there's like 3 teams we always talk about every year that could be a threat to us. It's LSU, it's Tennessee, and it's Auburn. That's it from the SC West. But no one's talking about LSU. It's literally just eyes are all on A&M and Jimbo Fisher.
And I don't necessarily think that there's pressure on Brian Kelly simply because the fan base for LSU, yes, they won that championship a few years ago, but before then, what was LSU wanting to do the most? They just wanted to compete again. They wanted to be in the picture. They just wanted to compete and be able to beat Bama. They're a different fan base than a Texas, whereas Texas is saying not only do we want to compete, we want to beat OU, and we want to go play for a national championship. We want to be in the picture right then and there. We want to go win it. We want to go do this. But LSU fans they have a better grasp of the situation. Don't get me wrong. They feel especially when they have a good team, they smell that sauce over there. It's get the gat, do all the rest of that stuff. They want to dance, they want to have fun, but that's only when they're good. They're just like Miami. When they feel like the U is back, everybody is going crazy. But it's a different pace, it's a different feel to it than like a Texas per se, because Texas automatically think that, oh yeah, we should national championship picture. We're about to go out here and ball out this year, win the Big 12, probably make a playoff. We're going 11-1. You're like, whoa, buddy, whoa! You just went 5-7 last year. What makes you think that this same team is going to be better? Bijan is amazing, but he's going to fall short again. He may get hurt behind that offensive line, especially if you start freshman. But I'm just ranting. But anyways, like I was saying though, LSU has a legitimate chance, but I don't think there's any pressure on Brian Kelly. And plus, be honest with you, I'm not necessarily sure that let me rephrase that. I don't believe that a lot of LSU fans are completely sold on Brian Kelly. So I don't think that the pressure is there yet, simply because they're not gelling with him as you would think, because you don't hear their fans just coming out, oh, I love Brian Kelly. He was a great hire. A lot of them feel like it was a boring hire. I think that to be honest with you, if LSU fans would have had it their way, their coach wouldn't be at Michigan State right now. He would be. You get what I'm saying? Their coach wouldn't be in East Lansing. He would be in Baton Rouge. So yeah.
So I think I'm just going to need to add a little bit to this because y'all have hit it perfectly. Is there pressure on LSU? The inevitable pressure of being LSU, but that's there regardless. So I don't think Brian Kelly has any added pressure. One of the things, though, we need to also remember about being in the SEC and being a major player in the SEC is you're graded on a standard that's not necessarily fair. Did you compete with Nick Saban in Alabama? And if the answer is no, you could be the second best team year after year after year. You're still falling short due to expectations. So it's not necessarily fair. But to answer the question directly, from the outside, no, because he needs a year. LSU has gone through a lot in the past few years, right? They haven't gone through Arizona State a lot. They've gone through a lot, and I think that does require some respect on on the fans' part of understanding this is going to be a work in progress. Guys, it has been an absolute pleasure. Before we get out of here, I want to pass it off to each of you so that everybody can figure out where to find y'all. We have an LSU fan who's saying that they love the hire. And look, I think we're all excited about seeing where y'all go with Brian Kelly, too. You got an established who's been to the playoffs. So very excited to see what LSU does. And you even heard here, one Bama fan, one OU fan picked LSU as a major player. So, Jonathan, I'll start with you. Where can they find you at? That way they can go over to your channel and catch all your great information.
Easy college football with Jonathan Lewis, and then at College FB Lewis on Twitter.
Awesome. Chris, how about yourself?
Hey, you guys can find me at Chris with a K, or you can find me at The Horns Down Pod with my boy Seth Oliveris. Follow him. He has a lot of great content. He's been doing a lot of softball stuff, so definitely follow him. But yeah, we are the Horns Down Podcast, and you can find us on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, all of that, Spotify. Just look us up, hit us up. Yeah.
Jets?
Yeah, man, you can find me on Twitter at Jants716. Also on want to follow me on Instagram, Jant Sports. YouTube channel, of course, is Jant Sports. Also check me out on Buffalo Fanbase Sports. Normally, fans, I just made a collaboration with Fansided, so I'm working with Buffalo Fanbase Sports there with Mookie Hawkins and a lot of those guys over there. Working with my co-host Kyrie Damos. We normally have our podcast called Fanbase every Tuesday, 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard, 6:00 Central Time, 4:00. Of course, if you're living over there in the West Coast. So yeah, we normally do those on Tuesdays. But also, man, we, for me, just finished my preview stuff. So for the most part, just did at least 40 of them, which is a new record for me. So expect the previews to be out. A lot of them are coming pretty soon. So yeah, man, check me out, Jant Sports, and also Buffalo Fanbase Sports.
Awesome, man. I didn't know you were doing the Buffalo stuff. That's awesome. Congratulations, man.
Appreciate it.
Awesome to hear. Well, guys, we try and do this every Monday at 5:30. The past few weeks, there's been a whole lot of stuff going on that has kept us from doing this, but we are back. So look forward to the streams every Monday, 5:30. And sometimes we even stream multiple times a week, depending on how we're feeling. That's something we want to get implemented, is 2 live streams a week, but we're going to get that to you once we have that ironed out. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. That's it.
Go Auburn. Go Eagle.
I can't stand you.
Such a troll, man.